which is 15b. Only one page is commentary. Okay, we're on test over base. The focus of the Gemara, the headline. This is the headline. What's the headline? Uba ruchot hamita. 4 lines from the top in the Hebrew, and in the English, it's the bottom column on the first column. Uba ruchot hamita. The Mishnah stated that you placed on your sukkah for your schach, you had parts of a bed. Let's say they have a bed frame. You have the side posts, one going this way, one going this way, 2 going this way, and 2 going this way. That makes up the bed. So if you went ahead and you used this this post, the side post of the bed as schach, that you're not allowed to use that as schach. It's not kosher for schach. It's invalid for schach. And the Mishnah stated, the question is, did you have more kosher schach than the side of the bed or not? Or the language of the Mishnah is, even if it's equal amount, it would be, as long as it would be good. As long as you have 50% kosher schach and 50% not kosher schach, the Mishnah gave it, but the Gemara explained, but really it's a little more than 50. You need a little more than 50% kosher schach for the sukkah to be considered valid. So we had, the Mishnah gave a case. Now let's say you had a number of let's say you had bed frames, and you place a bed frame, the side post of the bed frame as schach over here. Then next to it, you had an equal size of empty space, or a drop wider, and you place kosher schach. And then you place another part of the bed as the covering, and then you place a similar empty space of kosher schach, or drop more space. And the Mishnah stated, so then the Mishnah was talking about such a situation that with the sukkah would be kosher, as long as, the way the Gemara explained, you have a little bit more kosher schach than not kosher schach. But from the Mishnah, it's clear that this aruchot hamita, the sides of a bed, are not able to be used as schach. There's something inherently wrong with using a side of a bed for schach. Now, the question is, a side of a bed is not a bed itself. A side of a bed, is it mekabel tumah? Is the side of a bed susceptible to contamination or not? So now, we usually have a rule. You have a rule of, let's say you have a utensil, and then the utensil breaks, right? Like the Torah says, you have a kli cheres, earthenware utensil. If an earthenware utensil becomes contaminated, the only way you could go ahead and uncontaminate, you have to break it. And when you break it, it loses its status of a utensil. It's no longer a utensil. So here, we're talking about something, let's say, even if it never was contaminated, the bed came from a bed. So now you would think that this side post, this is a broken, it's no longer a utensil, because it's not a bed. It's only, imagine you're like in your manufacturing. Imagine if you would be in the manufacturing house, and you would be making the pieces for the bed, and you made the side post for the bed. No one's going to say that side post is makabel tumah while it's only at the stage of a side post. It has to go ahead and be erected as a bed. But this was once erected as a bed, once was put together as a bed, but now you took it was taken apart. It's no longer part of a bed, it was separated. So it came from something that was once susceptible to contamination. The bed, when the bed was whole and complete, the bed is susceptible to contamination. Now you have a side post that came from that bed. So the Gemara is thinking that side post is no longer susceptible to contamination, because as a side post, it's not a utensil, it's not a keli. To be able to receive contamination, have the ability To receive contamination, you have to be a utensil. But if you're a piece of a utensil, if you're just so the Gemara is understanding that it's not susceptible to contamination. And yes, the Mishnah indicated that side invalid for Succah. So what do we see from here? We see from here that if you have a item that was once part of a bigger item, or once was susceptible to contamination, but today it's no longer susceptible because of something has happened to it. There was some change in it, like here, it's the side of a bed. Or let's say you would have a situation, let's say you have a garment, right? And a garment is a certain size of a garment that has to meet a certain size in order for the garment to be susceptible to be able to receive contamination. Now, what do we receive contamination? That means if you have a garment, let's say you have a garment, 1 finger breadth, a small piece of material, let's say a little piece of material. That piece of material doesn't have real use. You need to have a certain size, let's say 3 fingers breadth, 3 fingers by 3 fingers of material that's considered something of use that you could use for a patch. To patch, a poor man would use it for a patch for his clothing. Right. But if it's not a minimum size, it doesn't have the ability to contract contamination. That means if a person who's tamei would touch that garment, it will not become contaminated if it's too small, because it has no use. Something that has no use does not have the ability to become contaminated. But now what happens if this garment once had a size, was originally the size that could contract contamination, and then it got worn out, and some pieces came off, and it's no longer the size. Do we say, Mr. Haber, that since it once had the ability to contract contamination, would the rabbis say you can't use it for Succah? Or would the rabbi say, look at today? Today it's no longer the size. And I presume the reason why the logically maybe to say there is a problem, one logical thing you could say is because people are not going to know the difference. If once it was susceptible to contamination, and now today it's not, people are going to say if you're allowed to use it today, when it's lower than the amount, they might think I could also use it even when it has the original amount. But they just look, they know this was once larger, and from using it today, maybe I could use the same thing yesterday, but they're not going to realize that today you only might be able to use it because it has a smaller size. Yesterday it had a larger size, and that's why you couldn't use it. So the question is, would the rabbis be concerned and make a gzeirah, and make a decree to say that you can't use it? And really the halacha is, we get the Shulchan Aruch, susceptible to contamination. Even if today it's no longer susceptible to contamination, the rabbis made a decree that you cannot use it. In Shulchan Aruch and Siman Tov Reish Chav Tes, Sif Beis, Tov Reish Chav Tes Sif Beis, it says the following. First, it says, by the way, you're Adam, you're on the group of our group chat, or you're not on the group? Oh, you're not. You added to the group chat, so then maybe you could send to the group. It's something that's makabel that we're on. It's something that receives contamination. Let's say metal, iron that receives contamination. You can't use for Succah. And even if they broke, good morning, Dr. Niven. Even if this item broke, and they don't have any more the size that could receive contamination, but since it once had the size, we say it's forever forbidden to be used for Succah. Okay. Now, No, we said when it's broken down, we said generally we would say it's not makabel tuma. We say it's not, once it's broken, it's not susceptible to contamination. But the question is, but if it once had a name, it once was part of something that was susceptible to contamination, do we say that even if today things have changed, it's no longer that size that was able to, but originally was the size that could receive contamination. So we say it still retains the problem. You can't use it for schach. So let's look at Dr. David. We are on Tesvav base 15b. We just mentioned Aruchat Hamitah. We're using the Mishnah stated that if you use the side post of a morning max, we have a Gemara right there for you if you want. If you use the side post of a bed, right, Max? Use the side post of a bed for schach, right? The Mishnah stated that that would not be kosher material, to use for schach. And the Gemara is suggesting we can learn a side halacha from the case of the Mishnah. So maybe that's also why the Mishnah gave this case. The Mishnah gave two cases of materials that were not good for schach. Metal spits, metal sticks. We know metal is not kosher for schach. And the Mishnah used the case of the bed frame. You use the bed frame as part of the schach. It's also not good. And there's a side chidush. There's a novelty that we teach that we're using the case of the bed frame, because it teaches us that a bed frame, even though it's not today able to receive contamination because it's only a piece of a bed, it's no longer a utensil. That's what the Gemara is thinking at the moment. Nevertheless, since it once had the name utensil, like we have the halach, you have the luchot, right? Shiva Asar B'Tammuz. Last week we commemorated the 17th of Tammuz was a fast day. What was one of the reasons why what was tragic on the day of Shiva Asar B'Tammuz? So one of the things was they broke the luchot. The luchot were broken on the 17th of Tammuz, right? Also, they breached the walls of the Beit HaMikdash of Yerushalayim on Yerushalayim. They broke the walls on the 17th of Tammuz. There were 5 tragedies happened a day. But the luchot, the tablets that were broken, when after Moshe got the new tablets, the second luchot, it says that not only did they place the luchot in the Aron, but the shirei luchot, the broken luchot, were also placed in the Aron. Meaning it was once so holy. It seems that it retains its holiness even though it broke. Even though it broke, it's like, I think this idea of someone was a Torah scholar and he forgot his Torah, but he once contained all that Torah. You still have to give him the certain honor. So that the broken item was still, once upon a time, it was not broken. Once upon a time, that was the real deal luchot. So therefore, that's what the Gemara is saying over here. The bed, the side of the bed, today it's only a side of a bed. But yesterday, it was part of it was actually part and parcel of a bed, and it had the ability to receive contamination. So therefore, it retains its status, and you can't. And at that state, when it was part of the bed, you couldn't use it for schach. Today also, even though it's just a side post of a bed, you can't use it for schach. Is that clear, Max? That's what the Gemara is saying. So the Gemara says on 15. Now on the top right side on 15b, Uba Ruchat Hamita, Lema Messiah. Let us say that this law of our Mishnah supports an opinion of Rav Ami. Lema Messiah Rav Ami Bar Tuvyomi. To a law of Rav Ami Bar Tuvyomi. What did Rav Ami Bar Tuvyomi say? The Omar Rav Ami Bar Tuvyomi, Stachacha, if you covered your sukkah bivloi kelim, with worn out garments to sulah. Let's say you had something made from cotton or something made from linen, because in order for it to be a possibility of being kosher schach, it had to have grown from the ground. right? If it didn't grow from the ground, it's not kosher for schach. So the question is, you have material that today is no longer capable of receiving contamination because it's worn out clothing that no longer has the size of the material that's able to receive contamination. And you went ahead and you took this worn out clothing and pieces of this worn out clothing and you put it onto your sukkah for your schach. Question, is it kosher? Is that a good sukkah or not? The material that you placed originated originally from the ground, or it's cotton or it's linen. It's not able to receive contamination because it's too small to receive contamination. Is it kosher? So Rav Ami says it's not kosher. Rav Ami says, and that's a chidush, even though today, right, Dr. Navid, this material is not able to receive a contamination. So you would say you have to, you checked off the box. It originated from the ground, no longer receives contamination. So maybe I should be able to use it for schach. But he says no, because since once it was able to receive contamination, you can't use it for schach. To our Mishnah, by the bedpost seems to be a match. The Gemara is comparing the case of our Mishnah, which is the side post of the bed, to the case of the garment. Right? That's what the Gemara is saying. We have the garment case is very clear. Today it's not able to receive contamination, it's too small, and yet Rav Ami says that you can't use it. Correct, Adam? The history, what was able to receive contamination as part of a bed. Is that right? So the Gemara, now it could be Rav Ami didn't use our Mishnah as a support, but our Gemara is suggesting. The Gemara, when a rabbi, a late rabbi, Rav Ami is a more contemporary rabbi. He's from the Amoraim. He's from after the Mishnah time period. He came up with this chidush. That there's an issue with this garment today because of the history. So the Gemara wants to suggest, you know what? Our Mishnah seems to support him, as Adam said very eloquently, in the case of the sidepost. To that, our Gemara rejects the support that we wanted to suggest. The Gemara says it's not muchach. It's not compelling. It's not compelling to say that our Mishnah is a perfect match for Rav Ami. Because the Gemara says our Mishnah, it's possible that this side post of the bed is still capable of receiving contamination, even as a side post. And therefore, it's not a match. You can't compare the item, morning Simon, if it still is able to contract contamination, you can't compare it to the case of a garment that became small, that's no longer able to receive contamination. So that's what the Gemara, that's going to be the outline of the Gemara. Max, is that clear what the Gemara is doing over here? You got it, Adam?
Well, because the history of the item matters, and now the Gemara is that actually it's not that it must be, right? Because it must be. Right. There might be another reason for why.
Right. Just remember, Rav Ami said his statement independent of our Mishnah. He went on record. He spoke about a worn-out garment that's no longer have the size to receive contamination, but once upon a time has a history that it received the size of contamination. And Ami says you can't use such a garment. We want to know, is our Mishnah the support for his halacha? That's what the Gemara wants to do. And so it depends on the item. Let's say for a garment, it would seem 3 fingers. It has to be a size you could use for at least a patch. To patch up, the tailor could use to patch up a poor, you yourself, a poor, not you, a poor person, someone who is poor could use. It has a certain use because you could use it as a patch to fill a hole in a garment. if and the average size of a patch is at least, let's say, 3 finger breadths by 3 finger breadths. Less than that, it's not even usable, not considered usable, and therefore it's not considered significant to be able to receive contamination. So, we have, interesting, my Succah Shabbat, we have also a similar concept, by the way. On Shabbat, in a public domain, you cannot carry from a private property to public property, or you can't from public property to private property. You can't carry 4 amot in public property, right? And now the question is, how much of the item would a person need to carry to be considered that he violated, that he would get the punishment of skila, of death, for violating Shabbat, right? Meaning, if a guy carries a garment into the street, takes a piece of material in his pocket intentionally, and he's warned, and there's 2 witnesses on Shabbat. Now, is it any amount that he carries? Would he get would he be liable for the punishment, or there is a specific amount that he has to carry? Right. If a guy will carry a crumb of cake, is he going to be intentionally? He was warned. He's not going to get killed for that, because it has to be a size that has some use, some meaning. That's what the Gemara is going to talk about in the size of a date. It might depend on the type of item that you are carrying out. Now, of course, you're not supposed to carry any size, but to get that level of that punishment, you have to do something that has some sort of purpose, that it has some use. You carry something that has something of meaning. Okay, a tissue has meaning. A tissue has use. But if you go ahead and if you would carry a small little piece of that, a guy would go ahead and carry it on Shabbat, this piece, I don't think this would meet the size that he has some real use. What do you use this for, right? That's a similar idea, Dr. Naviz, is something to be able to contract contamination. It has to be usable of some sort. If it was something then that might meet the criteria. Different items have different right. A little piece of a screw that has no use, maybe a screw might have a certain size, Okay, so that's what the side post of the bed. The stand. Right. Yeah. We're talking about Rashi. So Rashi fills in the blank. If you look at the Rashi, but V'loi Kelim, Rashi says V'loi Kelim is the Kama Mefarish Matloniot She'ein Behem Shalosh Ashalosh. See that, Rashi? A piece of garment, right, Simon, that doesn't even have 3 finger breadths. By 3 finger breadths. What? Well, probably you have a piece of material. Let's say you had leftover, you had cut, you're in the fabric business, and you had scraps of materials. You had cut things, now you have left, and now you went ahead and you had these garments, and they were very small, and now you went ahead and you made a very small sukkah. You didn't remember a sukkah. The size of a sukkah could be very small. The minimum, you only need a sukkah, let's say 24 inch, 7 tvachim by 7 tvachim. So technically at 24 inches by 24 inches. You even talk about less than 2 feet of 2 feet. You have to go ahead and only cover an area of 2 feet by 2 feet. So that's a very small area. So if you have scraps of material and you decide you want to use those scraps of material to cover your sukkah, you say, you know what? It's not mekabel tumah because it's so small. It's not able to contract contamination. And I just want to throw it over my sukkah. I'll throw it over I have the walls. And I'll throw it over and I'll go ahead and I'll use it as stock. Because that, the rabbi said, it's no good. Because since it's, even though it's a scrap today, but yesterday it was part of a larger piece of material that was susceptible to contamination. Good morning, Ali.
Not first, but, you know. Is it?
Because that's not being very good. Yes, because right. So very good. We saw in the Gemara if a guy wants to use apples, oranges as decoration, right? So an apple, real orange, contracts contamination, right? But if you're using it not for the purpose of schach, you're using it for beautification purposes, then it's okay, because then it has the ability to contract contamination, but it's not being used as a cover. It's an amazing concept that your intention, how you're using the item. If you place it, if you want to go ahead and you're in the apple business and you want to make a sukkah, or if you're in the banana business, you want to go ahead and you want the whole stuff made out of bananas, and for the purpose of schach, that's no good. But if you place some of these items close to the schach, not for the purpose of schach, to decorate, then it's considered. I think that there's a logic that says that it's like nullified by the schach, meaning it's secondary to the schach. It's not. See, if you go at it, if you're serving as schach, so you're face off. You're serving you're something that's not kosher. If you're apple that's used as schach, and now you're coming up, you're going against the law. But here, I'm not coming as schach. I'm not coming as a cover. There's certain laws that says schach has to be made from certain material. When you cover your sukkah, and again, what's called schach? Remember, schach is something that's made to protect you from the sun. Schach is a covering. You have to make the covering of a sukkah, right, Simon, from certain type of material. You can't be from materials that receive contamination. An apple and an orange that you use for decorations, I'm not using it as a cover. Therefore, it's not going to invalidate the sukkah. So getting back to our Gemara, Tezvav and Beis. So the Gemara says, just to bring Eli up to date, the Gemara wanted to prove from our Mishnah to support. The Mishnah says if you use the side post of a bed as schach, it's not kosher schach. Even though it once came, even though today the Gemara is speaking, it's no longer susceptible contamination. It's only a side post of a bed. It's like a broken utensil, and yet you can't use it. That supports the opinion of Ami that says you can't use a worn-out garment. That's no longer the size. It used to once be the size that could contract contamination. Today, it's no longer the size. Rav Ami says you can't use it. Now, Mishnah seems to be supportive of that, correct? Because the Mishnah says you can't use the side post, even though today it's not able to receive contamination. But since once upon a time it was susceptible to contamination, it's invalid. So the Gemara shoots back, no proof. Let's look at the language inside. Go back. Let's say the Mishnah is supportive of Rav Ami. That if you cover the sukkah with worn out garments, that's no longer the size that can receive contamination, it's still invalid because it has a history. So too, our Mishnah seems to indicate that because it has a history, that's why you can't use the bedpost, each side of the bed, even though the side of the bed is no longer able to contract contamination. So the Gemara answers no proof. The Amar Rav Chanan, Amar Rav Rebbe, Ba'arucha ushtei raglayim, b'ksara ushtei raglayim. Rav Chanan Amar Rav Ami said regarding a certain situation, he said that the case over there, and a different situation, was talking about the side post with its two legs, or the bed has the long side and has the short side, right? The top of the bed is the short side, and the sides of the bed is the long side of the bed, right? Where your head is on that board going this way is is short and the board's going lengthways is long. So hachanami baruch shtei reglayim b'kstara shtei reglayim. Here also our Mishnah we could explain our Mishnah that the Mishnah states it's not be able, you can't use the side post of the bed because we're talking about the side posts that are still connected with the two legs of the bed. And since it's connected with two legs of the bed, it still has use as a side post. And we're going to see what kind of use. The Gemara is going to say it has certain use. And because it has certain use, it's still able to retain the ability to receive contamination. And also Tosfos points out that's provided that you're able to put it back together with in the other parts are still around of the bed. The fact that it has some use now, and it's also be able to be put back together, the other parts of the bed are still around. That combination makes it that it's still able to contract contamination. The Gemara says, Heiche itma Rav Chanan Amar Rebbe. Where did Rav Chanan Amar Rebbe say his law? Ahad, it's not. On what we learned in the following halacha. Now we're on the following Mishnah. Now look at the Gemara Tes Zayin Amar Aleph. You have it? Mita mitameis chavila. We're on 16a. A bed, if you have a bed, when the bed is complete, if it's a whole bed, it could contract contamination. But if it's if you have a bed that's in sections, it's not whole. You have the leg of a bed, the side of a bed. It cannot receive contamination. Now, if it became contaminated and you want to go ahead and remove the contamination, you have to place the whole thing whole into the mikveh. You can't just take apart the bed and then dip each part into the mikveh separately. You have to put it whole. That's the opinion of Divrei Rabbi Eliezer. Say it again. I mean, if in the case that it would become contaminated, I'm saying a wood utensil. A wood utensil, there are certain situations that they can become contaminated. So under circumstances they become contaminated, you would go ahead and place it in the mikveh. Okay, so let's see. Mitaheres chavila. I mean, we can look at the halachot. Maybe we'll look tomorrow more the halachot of tefillah regarding practical points. And you could go ahead and you can make it. Good morning, Mr. Phil. Good morning, Rabbi Mansour. And you could go ahead and this opinion says if something became contaminated, if the bed became contaminated, you have to place the whole bed whole as a unit in the mikveh. However, Chacham Omrim no. Chacham say mitames ivorim. It could go ahead. A bed could contract contamination, even if it's not a whole bed. Even parts of a bed could contract contamination. And also, mitaheret evorim, you could go ahead and put it in the mikveh even when it's not whole. Even parts of the bed you could place in the mikveh. You have the bed became contaminated. You could go ahead. It seems from this language that you could go ahead and take apart the bed, each piece, and place each piece in the mikveh. So the Gemara says, "Maniu." What does it mean? Pieces of a bed, parts of a bed, can become contaminated. If it's not a whole bed, it's like a broken item. If it's a broken, in order for something to receive contamination, it has to be a utensil, it has to have use, right? So what's the use of part of a bed? That you say that it has the ability, right, Mr. Feldman, that it should be able to contract contamination. We had Gemaras, we welcome Mr. Feldman back, and we had Gemaras about the idea of if you're in remember in the manufacturing process, if you're at a stage in the manufacturing process that it's not a finished product, it's not able to receive contamination. So here it's a part of a bed. It's not a finish. It's what use does it have? It's not a keli. So the Gemara says, Amaniyu Amrav Chanan Amrav Rabbi Aruchu Shtei Reglaim Ksar Shtei Reglaim. We're talking about not just a little piece of a bed. We're talking about a side post of a bed, either the long side post with its two legs, or the short side post with its two legs, and that is something that is able to receive contamination. The question is back. But what is this used for? What kind of use could you have for this side post with two legs? It's only a piece of a bed. So the Gemara shoots back, what use does it have? So the Gemara says, do you know what the use is? To go ahead and place it parallel to the wall. You see the picture on 16A1, number 4. You see that picture? So the picture has, I don't know if it's hard to see from over here, you have this, here is the side post over here with its two legs. And then you go ahead and you stick, and since you could go, and usually the legs have cavities, have holes in it, you could stick a stick in that and go into a hole in the wall and therefore lean it against the wall, and then you could sit on that. Or you can actually weave ropes on that area and sleep on, lay down on it. So as is, this has use. You could take this item, take this side of a bed, and create and move and go a few inches, certain amount of inches away from the wall, and you could just set it up. It's ready to roll. You have the holes in the legs already. You just put the sticks in, and then you have a bed. Yes, and also, wouldn't be enough if you wouldn't be able to reassemble it. Tosaf says till it's full use, because really this is like what do you say? So therefore, if you would take this side post and you want to throw it on top of your sukkah, so the Gemara is saying this side post, since it has use, you could sit on it. You could go ahead. You could make it into this, and it could go back into its, reconnect with all the parts of the bed. I don't know about anything, but here the fact that it has use now, and it can reconnect, that combination makes it that it still retains its status of contamination. And therefore, since it retains its status of contamination, therefore you cannot use it for schach. But therefore the Gemara says there's no proof that something that no longer has the ability of contamination, and even though it has a history that it once was susceptible to contamination, because that's the issue over here. The issue here is, could we, Rav Ami came up with a chidush. Rav Ami's chidush was, if you had an item, we said, you can't cover a sukkah with something that's able to receive contamination, right? Like we said, that's a mushal in life. In life, we have to make sure we're not able to receive contamination. Should never be able to come tameh. We should even have, as someone told me, you shouldn't even have the ability to receive contamination. Don't put yourself in a place that you could receive contamination. That's how the halacha of the sukkah, the schach of the sukkah, you cannot have the ability to receive contamination. And we have no proof that something that once was able to receive contamination and today is no longer able to. Let's say a garment that once had a size that could receive contamination, and today it's no longer has the ability to receive contamination. Can you use that garment for schach? If the garment was from materials that came from the ground, linen or cotton, so we have no proof that you cannot use that material. Because maybe the only reason why our Mishnah says you can't use the side posts of the bed is because the side posts of the bed are still able to receive contamination as is, because it has use as is. But the halacha, as we said in Shulchan Aruch, and we'll end with this, the halacha is if you have a material that once upon a time had a history of contamination, it was able to receive contamination. Let's say it has a certain size that could receive contamination, but today no longer is able to receive contamination because that size was cut in half. But since it had once upon a time, you couldn't use this because it therefore remains forbidden to use as your materials for your schach. Yes. Right, but sounds like from this Gemara you can't use it for your schach. Because even though you broke the utensil, today it's no longer able to use contaminate.
The question was, so it was, got it, all the people, no longer use for Frank. Generally this, right? There's a hole.
Right, but can you?
Can I glue the vessel back together, glue, super glue, exactly the same way now there's cracking, and they do that with, they make their place beautiful with a crack or whatever. Is it tahor or tameh once you glue it back together?
And we would have to look it up. I would think once you remade it, you want to know. Does it get back? I presume now it's no longer tameh. You broke it. I presume it's. I presume that's not going to make it. Now it could possibly receive new contamination. But to say that it should come back, it's hard to imagine that it should. It's hard to imagine automatically. What? You break it, right? Right. That's what I would think. Yes. Yes.
I can't think of one instance.
Say that you said you. That you yes.
The shirt temporarily there to dry because it wasn't there as part.
It wasn't there.
of
It wasn't there as part of
carried
stuff.
on itself dry. So it could be there, but then you can't keep it there too long.
But it's not. But it's not there as such.
It's not there.
Right. It's just like the issue of the apple and the orange.
Right.
It can be decorate. It can have a couple of them. Right. Have a great day. Good morning. Good to have a great day. No. Yes.